Hey, welcome back to the podcast for another episode. And this week we are going to be talking about the sales technique that will make you a superpower when it comes to selling. Do you want to know what it is? You're still listening to me, which means yes, you do, which is. So the sales topic we're going to cover off today is all around questions and how sales questions are so important. And I wanted to start by talking about a great quote that Albert Einstein. So Albert Einstein, the person who invented the theory of relativity, and so many, the great physicist and what he invented. There was a great quote that was attributed to Albert Einstein, and he said, "If I had an hour to save my life, I would spend the first 55 minutes deciding which questions to ask." And I think that questions, I know that when I ask and I interview people for sales roles and opportunities, and I say to them, what's the best skill or trait of a salesperson or a business person that's good at selling? And a few people will say to me, they've got to be able to build relationships and talk and communicate and whatever else. And that there are other people that will say to me, they have to be really good listeners. And that's true. But very few people say to me, you've got to become a genius at asking the right question in the right way at the right time. And I fundamentally believe and know that in my sales career, and not just my sales career, but my personal life, I've been able to build great rapport and relationships by trying to ask questions and find out why things are the way they are. And the critical factor around sales and your superpower around sales is to know the right questions to ask and how to ask them, and to know that there are different levels of questions to ask at different points in time. And if you want to become a sales genius, you've got to be able to master the art of questioning. And let's give a couple of examples of what that looks like and what that is, and I'll go into a bit of detail in a few areas. But the first one is the type of questions that you ask. So I hear a lot of salespeople that will ask questions, and they will generally ask closed questions, and their default is a closed question. Would you like me to provide you a quote? Do you have an issue with your current supplier? Are you open to talking to someone new? How important is this? Or no, is there a problem with your current situation? And when you ask a closed question, certainly at the early stages of a sales conversation, your chances of getting more than a one-word answer are small. So if you say to someone, are you happy with your current supplier? The answer that you will get is, yes, I am. Yes, we are. And as a salesperson, then, you're a bit left, what do I say? I've got nowhere to go. But if you ask the right type of questions, such as, what is it about your current supplier that you like the most? What that then does is it may make the other person say to you, I don't want to tell you that, it's none of your business or whatever. But it might make them say, I really like them because they're great at doing this, this, and this. And that opens up more elements then that you can then dig into by asking further questions. So in that case scenario there, if someone was to say, what is it about your current supplier you like the most? Well, I like the fact that they do this, 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 and this, and they're good at that. Oh, fantastic. And what makes that particular skill they have so important for you? Oh, well, because they do that, that saves me time from doing this. So when you ask questions, there's a great example of a question. If you'd have asked that question in the wrong way, in a closed sense, you would have got no other information on what was really important to the potential buyer. But even though you've gone in and said, find out what is it about the current provider that works really well, and you've then probed in further, you find out that the critical thing for that person is time. So therefore, if you then know that that's their big factor for them is the time it saves them, and you think your solution can save time compared to the other provider, you've got a chart to then say, great, amazing that you think that time is a critical thing for you. What would you say if someone shared a solution that could save you even more time? So what you're doing is you're opening up what's important to the buyer that is going to make the buyer go, well, I'd be interested to know what that is. And you only get that by asking the right type of question. So if you'd have asked the question, like I said at the start, do you have a existing supplier? Yes, I do. you get nowhere. When you ask the question with an open question, you get better chance of information and better response and results. And the questions that we want to ask, I always talked a lot about Chris Voss's book, Never Split the Difference, but I've which is a great book to use, but I also use the Kipling questions. So Kipling, were who, what, how, where, when. Those are the questions that I generally like to ask in a sales situation. There is one of those Kipling questions, why, which I don't ask. And the reason being because why can be quite accusatory. But I would be asking questions, those sort of questions, on a regular basis to the people that I engage with. And by the way, questions are not just used at the early point of a conversation. They're used throughout the whole process. So a question that I might ask to someone I've worked with for a while and I'm thinking that we're going to do business together, but they're still a bit undecided, might be, what would have to happen to make you feel this is a good choice for you? Or where are you at? Where are you at in the process right now? What do we need to do to put a deal in front of you that would make you say yes? So by asking questions, or even if they give me an objection, for example, such as I'm having to think about it, no problems. Understand that. What would you be giving most thought to that can help you make a decision? So by asking questions, every single stage in the sales process, you will achieve more insight and information. And if you can then tie that in to be able to ask them in the right way at the right time, which we'll come on to in a moment, it's going to transform your sales world. So my point number one around great questions is know the type of questions to ask and ask open questions and make sure that you've built. So if you've got a list of questions that you currently use, write them down and see, let's say your question at the moment is, do you have an existing supplier? Change that round to be, tell me more about your existing supplier, or who is the existing supplier you work with and what do you like about them? And by the way, I'll put a link into the podcast show notes. One of my most popular downloads on my website is it's 52 qualifying questions to ask. And I will put a link to it so that you can have access to that resource. There's hundreds of people that download that every year. And it gives you insight into the questions that you can ask that are going to help you achieve the right results.
Need to create a sales plan but just not sure how? As of today, nearly 64,000 people have watched my video on how to create the perfect sales plan, and over 2,000 love it and what it can do for their business. So I'm creating a course that's specifically about helping people like you create a sales plan that's going to get you to the sales success you want. Interested to find out more? Want to know what it looks like? Keen to put that plan in place? Register at the link below and let's get you started on helping put in place a sales plan to make your business skyrocket.
So, first, understand that the questions are critical. The next part I'm going to talk to you then about is about asking questions at the right time. Okay. And the reality is when we're in a sales situation, we're going to have different sales scenarios. We're going to have the first time we make contact with someone as an outbound prospect. We're going to have our first call. We're going to have our first meeting. We're then going to have the second call. We're going to have a networking meeting. We're going to have a demo. We're going to have a proposal. We're going to have a negotiation. There is different stages in the process where we have different interactions with buyers. And what we need to have is we need these different sets of questions in our toolbox to pick out at the right time and to ask at the right time in order to know where people are at and what they're doing. And what I generally like to say to people is, in my experience, I try and layer different levels of questions depending on where I am in the process with someone. So if I'm at the start of a conversation with someone, I would generally use a starter question. So, for example, it would be if I'm having a conversation with someone and I've met, let's say, at a networking meeting, I might be, tell me a bit more about the company and what you do. Or if it's, for example, I'm having a conversation with someone that's arranged the first call with me, it might well be something like, great to speak to you. Tell me a bit more about what you'd like to cover in the conversation that will make it useful for you. Or I might say to someone, if it's just someone I've met at an event, or I've met, for example, on a second call, and I've catched up with them. Oh, great to catch up with you again. How was your weekend? You mentioned that you were going for dinner. How was that? So I would use different questions at different sort of points in the discussion. And I try and think of this as being like, if you go for dinner, you'll have starter, main course and dessert questions. and I maybe try and think of things in the same way. So that and the job of these starter questions at any point in time is to break the ice, is to open up the door, and to get people engaged with with you in a conversation. And then the next set of questions then are going to be a bit more detailed, which are more main course, a bit more warm up. You're building on what you've done so far, with the final ones then being where you're hoping to, if it's like at the end of the meal, get the job done. And if you become an expert at asking these type of questions in the right way, you'll get results. And I often say to people that sales and business is very much like dating. Now, if you went on a first date with someone and, the first question you ask was, where do you live? Okay, let's say you just met someone for a first date and the first question you asked was, where do you live? Or, how many kids, do you want with me? The first reaction you're going to get from that person is probably, you're a weirdo, I'm off out of here, because it's the wrong question at the wrong time. So you've got to be able to, and we'll talk about that in a moment. So you've got to know how to ask the questions at the right time. And the reality is, if you get questions like that wrong early in the process with buyers, you can absolutely F up an opportunity, but going in the wrong direction because you've done the wrong thing at the wrong time. So we've got to learn to be able to ask questions in the right way, at the right time, the right questions at the right time. And so try and understand that those starter questions might be, to get this thing going. A next warm-up question might be a question that's such as, how many people do you have working in the business with you right now? Or how big an issue is the X, Y, and Z service that you've currently got in place at the moment? Or what is it you're looking to achieve with a solution in the next 6 to 12 months or whatever? So these might be questions that you've done once you've built up that bit of rapport and engagement with someone that can engage you in the right way. And then the final questions are what I would call more personalized and more detailed. They're the pudding questions, like I mentioned. You have to earn the right to ask those. So, for example, it may well be if I've asked a question such as about what someone's looking to achieve, and they say to me, we want to grow our business by 20%. I might ask a question such as, okay, fantastic. What's the implications if you don't achieve that? How will that affect you and your family personally? Or how will it affect you and the business or the role? So these are more questions that are just got to be asked at, in a much, you got to be careful about how you ask them. If you ask too many of those very detailed, very close, personalized questions too early in the process, before people have built up trust and rapport with you, it's going to be too much too soon. They're going to be like, back off, it feels too much. Now, it isn't always the case. There are some people that will want those type of direct questions early doors, but majority of the world doesn't. And if you go too much in too soon and try and be too intrusive, you're going to come a cropper. So just be careful about, so try and stack your questions. Try and think about the questions that you would ask at the start of the conversations at early stages, during the middle of the process, and then during the end of the process that you can use, that can help you build the right rapport and engagement with people. So that's point number 2. So we've covered off the type of questions to ask in open questions. Point number 2 is to when to ask them. And then point number 3 is how you ask them. So I talk a lot to people around tonality and the way in which you deliver a message. Now, for example, if I said to, and I did a little video on this, which we'll share, but if I gave you a scenario of a phrase, let's use the phrase, what made you do that? If I say that phrase in 4 different tones, so for example, I could say the phrase, what made you do that? In a quite condescending tone. Or I could say, what made you do that? In an angry tone. Or I could ask it, what made you do that? In an empathetic tone. Or I could ask it, what made you do that? In an inquisitive tone. So the point being is there are different tonalities that we can use for our questions. And the reason that some people the reason that the sales super ninjas and the sales superheroes get incredible success is they ask the right questions at the right time in the right way. So you've got to be able to learn to adjust your tone and modulation of your voice so that you can make sure that the reference and the importance and the meaning of what you're trying to get across comes across in the way in which you say stuff. And unfortunately, tonality is something that is very hard to change and learn, but you have to change if you're to be in a position to win, do business with people. So, and again, an example being, if you're talking to a potential buyer and they talk about a potential issue and you go, okay, well, what made you do that? We get a tone that makes you look like you're disinterested in them. The chances are the buyer's going to think, well, they don't really care for that. It's going to make them think, oh, maybe I shouldn't share more information with them, and eventually even going to mean their barriers are put up. Whereas if you can adjust your tone slightly, and I always think there are three sort of tones. There's a higher pitched tone, which is higher, lovely, which I will use for exciting information. When someone says they've won an award, oh, fantastic. Or what was the award you won? So I'm passionate and enthusiastic about it. I'm showing my care. There's sort of the middle of the ground of, tonality, which is sort of how I might ask general questions. Oh, what's been the implications of that? And if there's then a third tone, and there's a term that's been phrased, people call it late night DJ. If you remember on the radio industry, a guy I always remember when I was growing up, it was Graham Torrington, late night love songs, and he used to literally just lower his voice and say, "Hey, let's talk about this" as a tone. And so you might use that tone if you're maybe asking someone a difficult question, such as what's been the personal implications for you for not getting to that target, or for what's been causing that problem for you, and has it impacting you personally? So you'll lower the tonality of your voice to be that late night DJ tone. And if you can adjust your tone at the right time based upon the question, so the right question at the right time in the right tonality, you are going to become a sales superpower. And like I say, it's a real, it's just the most important thing that you have to do. Our job as sales people and business people is to get inside the mind. I continually talk on my website, I talk about getting inside the mind of your buyer, become a fly on the wall in the mind of your buyer. And the only way that we can understand what's going on inside the mind of someone else is by asking them questions in a great way at the right time that makes them want to open up to us and to share information with us. And our job is to find out about what concerns and what excites them and what worries them and what gives them comfort and what starts their engines and what stops them from starting. And, if we understand and get to understand people and what's going on in their world and what's driving them, and by doing that, by asking great questions, we can not only just achieve sales success, but we won't win everyone we engage with. We're not going to get every bit of deal done. But what that will do by asking questions, it can mean that we can save ourselves time. Too many people start chasing opportunities that they're never going to win because they just think that's the right thing to do. Whereas actually, you're better off to be in a position where you ask a question to qualify or to find out where someone is, so you can maybe say, hey, we're not going to go do business with this guy. They want X, we offer Y, we'll leave it to it, so we save ourselves time. And then the biggest waste in sales is emotion and time that gets lost. So I guess my final point to this is just become an expert in asking the right questions in the right way at the right time, and you'll win a lot of business. Albert Einstein was a genius and he was right. If I, as I said at the start, if I had an hour to save my life, I'd spend the first 55 minutes knowing what questions to ask. And so become an expert at asking the right questions in the right way at the right time. Learn how to, adjust so that when you get responses back, you can move away from the closed questions, which we all want to sometimes, default to those open questions that can open up the prospect to share and buy, to share information with us. And if we do that, we're going to be in a better position to learn and then to hopefully do business or save time and energy and emotion. So that's the podcast for this week. But I always leave the podcast with an inspirational story or an inspirational quote. As I've said to you all, I'm looking for more inspirational stories. So if you've got one of someone that's done some incredible things, please let me know. But I'm going to share a quote with you that I love from Richard Branson. And it's a great quote. And it says, if your dreams don't scare you, then they are too small. So I guess my question for you at the end of this podcast is, what's your dream for your business or your role or what you're doing? And does it scare you? If the answer to that is yes, it does, great stuff, moving on in the right direction. If the answer is I don't even have a dream, I'm not sure what I want to achieve, or if it doesn't scare you, then maybe let's have a conversation, let's have a chat. I'm always open to having conversations to support people and help people and help them on their business path and goal. And look, I hope that whatever your dreams are and whatever you're looking to achieve in your business, that you can do that in a positive way, and that the podcast and the insights I share are going to help you make that happen. So thanks so much for listening as ever. I hope that you've enjoyed the episode. If you can, if you do enjoy the podcast and listen to it, please can I ask a favor? Can you go on and review us? It might just take you a couple of minutes, but just go onto the podcast, wherever you're listening to, whether it's on Spotify or Apple, just go on and review us. Just put a couple of words or phrases. And if you think it's a great podcast, please let other people, see the reviews so that we can help more and more people get the insights they need to go and get business success. So that's it for this week. Thanks again, guys. Have a brilliant week ahead, and I'll see you then. Bye-bye.